Namaste and welcome to my channel. What we're going to discuss in this tutorial, lecture, whatever you want to call it, is the ring of protection. Okay, now rings of protection are very difficult to get hold of. They do sell them online. However, you have to be very careful buying rings of protection online, and there's a reason for that. Like it or lump it, a lot of magicians who deal with the jinn are sheer, which means black magicians. Now, on the surface this sounds very romantic and oh wow, you know, this is really attractive. It's not. It's not. And I'll explain to you why it's not. Generally speaking, a sheer magician will work with a specific jinn. However, jinns are creatures of energy, and quite often they will get a jinn which cannot easily be controlled. Then they usually cut a deal with the jinn, and the deal goes something like this. They put the jinn in the ring, and then they sell the ring. Now the person buys the ring, and at first the ring will work quite well. Then the genie in the ring will start attacking the person, because that's what it does and that's what it's there for. The sheer magician literally has walked away from a very mischievous and powerful jinn by giving it to somebody else, who of course by buying it has volunteered to have that ring and that genie. Now, a lot of things are in contention here. One, the jinn realistically shouldn't be bound, or if it's bound, it's only bound for a short time, because jinn don't like being bound. Now, part of the jinn culture is something called a Kadam ring. We have a picture here of Aladdin. When he first rubs the ring, they don't call it Kadam, it's a genie in the ring, and the genie comes out, and apparently it's a slave of the ring. Now, yes, you can have genie slave of the ring, but it's for a very limited time. It's very complicated obtaining a genie in the ring as well, because it means that you have to, well, there's several ways of doing it. One of the ways that I've seen and not read about is genies belong to tribes or families, and a successful magician will contact the tribe or the family and ask to borrow the jinn for a certain amount of time. And this is done by communicating with like the head of the tribe. The jinn is then put into the ring for a specific period and a specific sacrifice. However, there's another way of doing it as well, where the magician will contact a jinn king, and they work a deal, and the genie is then put into the ring again. However, it's very dubious as to whether or not the jinn will protect you. It will more than likely attack you. It won't attack you straight away. It will work with you until you get to the point where you're not really protecting yourself, or you think it's safe. At the moment that period has entered into the relationship, that is when the jinn will attack. And realistically, there are very few people who can get jinns out of the body, especially one that is malicious. Now, interestingly, I've worked with jinn masters, and they all say the same things. 99 times out of 100, a jinn does not want to attack a human. There's lots of reasons for this, but the main reason for this is that humans can kill them quite easily. Now, how this is done is there is special incantations that you can use where you go into the world of dream and astral, and you can approach the jinn, and in that state you can easily kill it if you wish. Now this is real. Now, quite often when a jinn master works with a entity, it will be on the astral, or it will be in a dream-like situation, and that's how they tend to work with them. So, if you like do out of body, or you can do astral, then this is a good way to contact the jinn, and maybe not having to bind it. But if you bind it, it's better to contact it on the astral and find out what is really going on. Why is it in the ring? Is it happy to be in the ring? Do you need to release it? Now, way back in time, Kadam, I believe, the same guy who translated the Arabian Nights, had the story of Aladdin. Now, if you read the proper story of Aladdin, it's really full of occult lore, and realistically, Aladdin is not a nice guy, and neither is the magician. So you have two very despicable characters come together, and the magician takes Aladdin to an underground place, and he gives him the ring to protect him. Aladdin goes down underground into this exquisite palace where he finds the lamp, and he brings the lamp out. The magician then says to him, "Give me the lamp." And Aladdin said, "I'll give it to you when I get out." Because obviously Aladdin does not trust the magician. Well, they have a slight tete-a-tete, and then the magician slams the door, the stone door, shut, makes it look like it's never been there, and Aladdin is trapped inside the cave. I mean, there's lots of ways to look at this. I mean, you can look at it literally, that Aladdin goes into the cave, and in this cave he finds a lamp. In this lamp there's a more powerful genie which helps him get all what he wants. However, if we know anything about the occult, then we know, say if we look at Plato's idea of the cave is representative of the mind. So perhaps in the same way, Aladdin doesn't really go into a cave, he goes into his mind, and in his mind he finds vast treasures, vast rewards, and of course he also finds power enough that he can marry a sultan. Now, a few years ago we had The Secret, which was saying much the same thing, that if you go into your mind and you change your mind, then you can materialize things. Well, this is much the same in the Aladdin story, but if you read it as a book of occult lore, there is a great journey through wilderness. This can be seen as self-sacrifice and meditation, and when one gets to a level of meditation and self-sacrifice, then, if you like, you steal the will. But this isn't disregarding the fact that the jinn is not real. This is just one of the processes which magicians can contact the jinn and then put them in a ring such as this to protect the magician who is working with it. Now, once again, there's lots of contradictions, but the one thing I can tell you, despite the contradictions, the power of the jinn is real. I've seen jinns taken from somebody and put into a host, and then the host speaks not in their own voice, not even sometimes in their own language, and it speaks to the master. And I must admit, this is quite an interesting phenomena. I mean, obviously, at first when I thought it, I thought this was some kind of sideshow. But when I saw it, one thing completely convinced me that the jinn was 100% real, was the jinn couldn't understand how a person in a foreign country could appear in the same country as it was doing. And it didn't understand the idea of Skype. And it was asking, well, how can you do this? How can you do this? And I found that quite interesting. Because of course the jinn can move in the flash of an eye to wherever it wants. And of course I presume its first concern was well, how can this person be in the same area as me? How it came about was that I met a jinn master who was showing me an exorcism, and I was watching through Skype, and then literally the jinn saw me watching through Skype, and it was asking all these questions. The master wasn't really interested in talking to it. However, he'd found out that the jinn in question that they'd exorcised had been put in the ring against its own, if you like, free will. Because if you read the Quran, both humans and jinn have free will. And essentially what happened after that was he could have killed it using Quranic verses, but he didn't. He says, do you have a family? And the first thing the jinn said was, no, I don't have a family. So he said, okay, then I'll kill you. And then he said, yeah, I have a family. And he says, can you bring your family? And he said he would. So he brought the family to where the exorcism was taking place. And the master spoke to his family, his tribe member, and he explained that he could kill him if he wanted, but he understood that he was a prisoner there against his will, and that they could take him back. And then literally the woman who was experiencing the full possession just sat up, not remembering anything, and the jinn had disappeared. This story is 100% truth. I saw it with my own eyes. I should have recorded it, but I didn't. I didn't record it. But there are plenty of examples on YouTube where this phenomena is happening. So I would really think twice about binding, because it may not go as you want it to go. However, if we follow occult law, as I said, we can go right back to the tales of Aladdin, and he has a bound jinn. He has a bound jinn to the ring, and he also has a bound jinn to the magical lamp, which gives him everything that he wants. But as I also said, you can also look at this purely from a psychological viewpoint, where using the machinery of the jinn, one can get whatever they want. But this isn't disregarding the jinn are not real. This is just trying to sort of like show you that the process of the jinn is a very strange process. That in life, even people who are not magicians or even study magic tend to be very, very successful, and they get whatever they want. One can presume, like Aladdin, they found a way to operate their desires and get their desires, which is something which is very difficult to learn, and something which, regardless of Rhonda Byrne and The Secret, I don't think is incredibly easy to adopt. However, magic per se is bringing a different reality into your reality. If we read a great deal about how the jinn works, they are from a different level of consciousness to ourselves. They live in somewhere called the Kaf, and we pull them through to our reality. And when they come through to our reality, they can change states, they can change objects if they wish. There's plenty of people who have done this and recorded this. However, it's extremely difficult because realistically, the jinn don't really understand our world. They don't. I've seen plenty of exorcisms now where I understand that the jinn doesn't really understand what is going on in our dimension. They can be in our dimension, but they don't see it the same way we see it. So, like, I am sure people have asked for wishes, and I am sure that the jinn has answered their request. However, has the jinn understood your request? We may be dealing with something which is thousands of years old. So, you know, you think what life was like 1,000 years ago, you pull it through to this 21st century dimension, and it may not be on its game. And I think that's another issue. However, part of the jinn culture, part of the protection, there is a creature or an entity called the Kadam. The Kadam works through the Quran and Quranic verses. Now, it is classed as a jinn. However, it bears no resemblance to how a jinn works. And we're going to discuss the Kadam, the advantages of having a Kadam, and more importantly, what's your mindset and what you have to do to be able to summon the Kadam.